Hello and welcome to NewsClick. Today we have with us Professor Vijay Prashad, whom we are linking through Skype and a phone to discuss the Libyan events. Vijay, good to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I believe that the way things are turning out in Libya, it does seem that Gaddafi's days are numbered. What do you think?
Well, it's hard to say with any certainty. Gaddafi is a very stubborn man in a way. He has been in power for 42 years. He's got various forms of military power at his disposal. One of his sons, for instance, has gathered a battalion of troops around Tripoli. So they are making a kind of siege formation. Gaddafi has also, of course, got Serbian mercenaries. So I wouldn't say that the game is going to end as quickly as it ended for Ben Ali and for Mubarak. In North Africa, they are saying that Ben Ali left on Friday, Mubarak left on Friday, and Gaddafi will leave on Friday. But I don't think it's that simple.
So it may not happen this Friday, but if you really look at what's happening, he seems to have lost a part of the eastern part of Libya, which is really half the oil wealth of Libya as well. So one half of the country in terms of actual population of oil wealth he seems to have lost. In that sense...
Yes, exactly. In a sense, Gaddafi has never had hegemony over eastern Libya. Eastern Libya has posed a problem since 1969. And, in various times since 1969, there have been rebellions in eastern Libya against Gaddafi, and he's put them down. The Confederacy of Tribes of eastern Libya are extremely independent. They have various grievances against Gaddafi that are long-standing, one of which is that they feel that the king, King Idris I, was their king, and Gaddafi's overthrowing of him in 1969 took power away from them. So there are historical grievances. Gaddafi has not really had full control over the region, but now certainly he has lost, not hegemony, but he's lost control of the space of eastern Libya. He's lost control over some of the army that was garrisoned in eastern Libya. So certainly the eastern part seems to have removed Gaddafi's authority entirely.
If we look at what we are seeing, and of course you're right that it's very difficult to predict which way things will go, but nevertheless it does seem that Gaddafi has lost whatever revolutionary potential or pretensions he had earlier. The course of Nasserite revolution which he led in 69, that seems to have run out, and what we really see is a Gaddafi who is made up with the neoliberal agenda, who has also been for the last almost 7-8 years quite close to what the United States has been doing in the Middle East, and his latest statement on blaming Al-Qaeda, Islamic fundamentalism and so on, seems to also see that he's sort of trying to play up to the West on this one.
Well, firstly, Gaddafi's Nasserite revolution ended in the early 1980s. Fortunately for him, the American president was Ronald Reagan, who had the bad taste to bomb Gaddafi's household and killed his 15-year-old daughter, and that bought Gaddafi a sort of revolutionary lease of life. In other words, people didn't see that beneath the rhetoric and the sort of demonization of Libya, beneath that, Gaddafi had already changed the nature of his revolution, what he called the revolution within a revolution. They began to privatize large sections of the economy. He began to push for certain kinds of agricultural reforms, so-called, which benefited big landowners. So from the 1980s, a neoliberal agenda had come into the Libyan economy. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The second thing to keep in mind is that since the 1990s, during the Algerian upsurge, Gaddafi began to fear greatly the emergence of a kind of Salafist Islamic politics against him. And he used to say in the 1990s that Salafism is going to be rooted in eastern Libya, his historical enemy, as it were. So on the one side, there was the economic neoliberalism And on the other side, there was this slow or maybe gradual alliance or allegiance with the kind of Western paranoia over the growth of Islamism in North Africa. Gaddafi after 9/11 was a quick convert to the global war on terror. When the United States started to talk about Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, Gaddafi very quickly came on board. In fact, now he's in his rambling speech that he made 2 days ago, he said once again that the Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb are gathering in eastern Libya. I heard some rumors yesterday that Gaddafi is freeing many of the Salafi prisoners from Tripoli's jails and sending them to the east, almost to create exactly what he is saying is going to happen so that he can then bomb them. So on at least these two fronts, that is on the neoliberal side of things and on the question of, the global war on terror, Gaddafi has gradually moved his Nasserite revolution to its opposite.
But interesting still, the West sees him as a figure who's really anti-West and needs to be overthrown. So in that sense, he has a very different vibe, if you will, from what Mubarak, for instance, had with the West.
Well, yes, and that has something to do with Gaddafi's own history. That is, he had a 22-year history of being an anti-imperialist radical. It has something to do with his own turbulence, his own kind of bizarre political views. 1 minute he is 100% behind the West, and the next minute he's talking about, the need for Europe to become an Islamic continent. He was in a European meeting recently where he gave a speech saying that Islam is the future of Europe. So he's quite a bizarre character. He's embarrassing to the barons of Davos. They very much like Ben Ali. Ben Ali and Tunisia, for instance, were chosen in 2010 as in the Global Competitiveness Report from Davos as the leading country to invest in Africa. Ben Ali was a very sophisticated man. He would be able to sit and talk to Sarkozy about French literature, things like that. Whereas Gaddafi is plainly an embarrassment, even if he was a craven ally in the last few years of the United States global war on terror.
Vijay, if we look at what's happening in West Asia and North Africa, it's very clear that we have a democratic upsurge that is taking place. Not clear which way it will go, but nevertheless a clear democratic upsurge. Do you think in the long run this will mean that in West Asia, North Africa, we will get normal politics, not the kind of authoritarian regimes where there is really an absence of politics? Do you think that is likely to happen?
Well, North Africa suffers and the Gulf states suffer more than anywhere else in the world from the resource curse, obviously. Libya has the world's best quality oil. It has so-called sweet oil. Even though it only produces 4% of world oil output, it has the best output, best oil, which you know better than I. And so there are lots of reasons why the mandarins of the world order don't want to see this region go out of their control completely. But it's very clear that if we can say that in the early 2000s, South America exited from the hegemony of the United States order, that the Arab world seems to be searching for a similar exit now. It's also clear, and this is why I want to be a little cautionary, that, for instance, in Bahrain, there was the upsurge at the Pearl Roundabout, but then a few days ago, the King of Bahrain decamped for Riyadh, where he kissed the substantial jalabia of King of Saudi Arabia, and they discussed how to deal with the Shia uprising against the Sunnis. So they are trying to make this into a sectarian matter. In North Africa, there is the boogeyman of the Muslim Brotherhood. So the people in authority and power are not going willingly. In other words, Ben Ali is now in Saudi Arabia, Mubarak is at the seaside, the leaders have been removed. But so far we haven't seen the structures of power being threatened at all. It's true that in Egypt, even the United States has said, revoke the emergency laws. They're saying revoke the emergency laws, but the massive infrastructure of the internal security state is not on the table to be removed. So what I would suggest is that, yes, North Africa and the Gulf states are looking for an exit, from U.S. hegemony. But it's not entirely clear right now that the exit is going to be as easily found, perhaps, as the South Americans found it, in at least by 2003. There they had a more advanced agenda, having struggled against neoliberalism for 10 years. They had the institutional and organizational capacity to carry forward the people's grievances. I'm not sure right now that the game is so clear in the Arab world and in North Africa.
But at least the start of democratic politics in some of these countries can open the way, where previously you really had political stagnation and logjam. You really were not seeing any developments taking place. To that extent, I think
absolutely. I mean, for instance, I would say that this is, for me, the most remarkable event in the Arab world in my lifetime. And I think that this is the beginning of a new opening, which is why, one has to be both optimistic and cautious at the same time. This is not the end of a revolution. This is the beginning phase of a new part of the revolution. I mean, I fear very much that the counter-revolution is going to be harsh. Today, the British government has sent another warship to sit off the coast of Libya. In 2008, when Hezbollah and the government of Lebanon were fighting, the Saudi king at the time talked to the American ambassador and said we need to create an Arab force from the Arab periphery to enter Lebanon and prevent the increase of Iranian power. I fear that the Europeans, the Americans, and the Saudis are going to try their very best to color this revolutionary upsurge as a sort of Iranian-influenced upsurge, which is not true. So, we have to be very cautious that here there are two problems. One, the local despots like Ben Ali, Gaddafi, etc. And then there is, of course, the large contradiction against imperialism. Just because the large contradiction against imperialism exists does not mean that one defends Gaddafi. I think that is a very narrow-minded kind of approach. There are two problems here, the immediate problem and then the larger problem. And both have to be confronted to make space for what you call the normal politics that can emerge in the Arab world.
Thank you, Vijay. We'll come back to you on other issues as well. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks a lot.